Yeah, hi folks. Yes, Winston Peters has really been targeting the mainstream media lately in respect to the $55 million Public Interest Journalism Fund, or more commonly known as Jacinda's media bribe. And my God, has he hit a nerve, because they know it's a bribe. And as per usual, when they're backed into a corner, they team up and gaslight the public with falsehoods. And here's an example of that.
Christopher Luxon is aiming to hit the ground running, hoping to achieve 49 goals in his government's first 100 days. But the Prime Minister, holding his first press conference after meeting his cabinet, couldn't escape questions about his deputy Winston Peters and his media attacks. Here's senior political reporter Benedict Collins.
Good afternoon, everyone.
It was Christopher Luxon's first post-cabinet press conference, and our new Prime Minister sure was keen to get down to business.
Because today I'm outlining our work plan for this coalition government's first 100 days in office.
That plan, killing off lots of the previous government's policies.
We will repeal Auckland's regional fuel tax, the ute tax and Three Waters. We will dispense with blanket speed limit restrictions and stop Auckland's light rail, and let's get Wellington moving.
But the topic soon turned to his deputy, Winston Peters, who's been accusing the media of taking bribes this week.
I mean, Winston's allowed to make his remarks in the way that he chooses. He may not express it in the way that I do it, but honestly, we have serious challenges in this country and we are focused on those things.
Mr. Peters believes the government's Public Interest Journalism Fund compromised the media's independence.
So now you cannot defend $55 million of bribery.
Exactly, and it clearly was a bribe. Bribe. To try and make someone do something for you by giving them money, presents, or something else that they want. Now folks, this is from the Public Interest Journalism Fund, and I've posted a link to this below. Now, New Zealand's media was bribed with $55 million to push a false narrative of the treaty. New Zealand identity and culture and public interest requirements. Content actively promotes the principles of partnership, participation and active protection under Tiriti o Waitangi, acknowledging Maori as a Tiriti partner. Now that is completely false, folks, as Maori ceded sovereignty. There is no such thing as a partnership. There never was. And of course, if the media didn't adhere to their version of the treaty, they could require repayment of any funding already provided under this agreement. However, we will negotiate with you about costs you have already incurred up to termination, and we may, but are not required to, meet those costs.
If anyone is keeping this strange argument, this gaslighting argument by the mainstream media going with Winston Peters, it is the mainstream media themselves. Mr. Peters is a master at this. Taking in the negative energy of those who simply don't like him because he's not like them. There is no doubt, let me just say definitively, whatever you want to call it, when a government gives news organisations, it's actually more than $100 million, and it's still going on through New Zealand On Air. A whole lot of announcements made yesterday for the funding of journalistic endeavour that require those people to make certain editorial decisions in keeping with certain philosophies about things like diversity and the Treaty of Waitangi. There is no doubt this is bribery to achieve an end, a political end or a social end. That's what New Zealand On Air does. That's what the Public Interest Journalism Fund was designed to do. And the mainstream media took the money, they gagged for it, and they signed whatever was put in front of them. I don't know if the bribe worked, But it was there, and it is a bribe, and it is a unbelievable act of gaslighting for those who have benefited from that bribe to run round saying it wasn't. Facts matter, and the facts are clear. The Public Interest Journalism Fund was a free gift to media, millions of dollars in many cases, if they adhered to the government's interpretation of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. If in the running of their businesses they embrace the spirit of the Treaty of Waitangi, even though those businesses are not signatories to it. It created an atmosphere where we could not have a debate, a proper public debate about those issues, because all the state-funded news media would do would scream racist at anyone who stepped outside the woke view.
Get it very clear.
He even upstaged the PM at his first cabinet meeting yesterday.
Before you ask one more question, tell the public what you signed up to get the money.
But Christopher Luxon doesn't like the fund either.
Well, for the very reason that it actually leads to perceptions of bias, rightly or wrongly.
Some who know Winston Peters say there's a method to his madness.
What he's getting to is his own supporters who would hold those sort of conspiratorial negative views.
No, Mr. Dunn. The only people who are conspiratorial are people like you who deny a bribe even happened. And of course, the former Minister of Broadcasting is proud of the fund.
It was knives out again from the Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters at the new government's first cabinet meeting, where he doubled down on his media bribery claims. The so-called bribery he's referring to is the $55 million public interest journalism fund that was set up during COVID-19 to help broadcasters, including the one that we work for. The fund came to an end in July this year, but it hasn't stopped old Winston Peters having a crack at the media.
First 5 questions. So, no, you cannot defend $55 million of bribery. See the speed at which TVNZ and RNZ, which are taxpayer owned, understand this new message. Are they independent? Well, isn't that fascinating? I've never seen evidence of that the last 3 years. Tell the public what you signed up to get the money. That's called transparency. Okay?
Appropriate, Mr. Luxon.
Thank you.
Right, ready to go? Labour MP and former Broadcasting Minister Willie Jackson is with us this morning. Morena, good morning.
Morena, Ryan.
To see you. So, what did we sign up for? You know, is there anything in there that you would consider bribery or corruption?
You know, well, one, you're protected by the Broadcasting Act anyway, but which is, I think it's 42 and 44 of the Broadcasting Act covers broadcasters in terms of ministers interfering. In New Zealand On Air is protected, so everyone's protected. In terms of the fund, I'm really proud of the fund.
Yes, one of the biggest Maori grifters out there is proud of the fund. Oops, my mistake, he's not Maori, is he? Willie Jackson, DNA test results, 18% English, 34% Chinese, 25% Ashkenazi Jew, 0.4% African, 20% Polynesian, 2% Spanish, multimillionaire, identifies as an oppressed Maori. And what percent of that 20% Polynesian is actually Maori? Now folks, I best not say anything during this clip as I might get cancelled.
The reality is he was expressing the views that a lot of people think, actually, which is that the Public Interest Journalism Fund didn't work that well, actually.
But it's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie, Chris. And that is the job of you as the government to clear up, because otherwise it just plays into that perception and adds fuel to the fire. You cannot have the Deputy Prime Minister just echoing the ramblings of some conspiratorial lunatics on Twitter.
And of course, Chippy Schoolboy has to have a go at Winston as well.
Kia ora everybody, lovely to see you all again. I said during the election campaign that I was concerned that a national New Zealand First Act government would be a coalition of chaos. I wasn't quite expecting them to prove it so spectacularly so soon into their term in government. The behaviour that we've seen from Winston Peters in the last 48 hours is just wrong. Christopher Luxon needs to show that he is actually the Prime Minister and stamp down on that very quickly. It is wrong for Winston Peters to be stepping outside the Cabinet Manual at the very meeting where they were supposed to be confirming the Cabinet Manual. It's also wrong for him to be questioning and potentially directing Television New Zealand and Radio New Zealand when they have legislative editorial independence. And I think that the Prime Minister needs to show some leadership, make it clear to Winston Peters that that is unacceptable and make sure that that stops.
Wow, the arrogance of that little schoolboy is truly despicable. He thinks he has the right to lecture a 78-year-old Winston and advise Luxon as well. And if Luxon heeded his advice, that would be the end of the coalition. Winston will never ever be silenced, period. Anyway, folks, I've posted all the relevant links below.